It's 5 o'clock in London, it's midday in New York, 12 a.m. midnight in Hong Kong, 2 a.m. in Sydney, 9 a.m. in San Francisco, 9:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Patrick L. Young. The IPO video live stream, Series 30, Episode 5, that's Episode 179, starts here. And we begin with an incredible, wondrous thing, ladies and gentlemen, the 40th anniversary of a great market. It wasn't just Independence Day in the Philippines last Thursday, June the 12th. This year marked the 40th anniversary of a great leap forward in the world's options markets. 40 years ago in 1985, OM Group in Stockholm, Sweden, debuted an electronic marketplace for options. Huge plaudits to Olof Stenhammar and all the team who created this unique for-profit exchange. An epoch-breaking, mold-breaking enterprise. Happy 40th anniversary, OM Group, and congratulations to Olof Stenhammar on 40 years on from what was a truly incredible event. Meanwhile, ASX, they've had somewhat of a Pyrrhic victory, followed by unprecedented review. The ASX lurched from this Pyrrhic victory to, well, disaster this week. The win was gaining 10 million Australian dollars in the sale of a stake in digital asset, albeit the ASX spent the better part of 250 million Australian dollars and didn't have a working system in return. Then ASIC bit back with an unprecedented inquiry into things it reckons the ASX is not doing right, which is just about everything. 2 years into the Restore Trust 5-year plan, things are evidently going from bad to worse in Sydney's monopoly bourse monolith. Two good news on deals completed this week at MIAX, Miami International Exchanges Group. They bought the International Stock Exchange that's based in the Channel Islands in the UK. All the best to IPO-VID alumnus Kees Vermaas and the Thijs team under MIAX ownership. And then, well, a cornucopia of IPO-VID alumni are involved in the next deal, which is completed. Congratulations to Bjorn Sibbern. A two-time appearance on IPO-VID has been his luck in life. And Bjorn and his SIX group from Switzerland, which he is CEO of, they've completed the acquisition of the London Paris Exchange, Aquis. All the very, very best to another IPO-VID alumnus, the founder of Aquis Exchange, Alistair Haynes, on his retirement, having founded and grown a fascinating business. Our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, he's growing a fascinating business. We're introducing the Ethiopian Stock Exchange, a securities exchange to be absolutely pedantically precise, and our guest is Michael Habte. Michael Habte has worked with a series of top-tier global financial firms, including Citigroup, Bloomberg, BBVA, Moody's, and Wood Mackenzie. Michael co-led the ESX Project Office, which led to his becoming COO, Chief Operating Officer of the Ethiopian Securities Exchange, where he oversees all aspects of the exchange's operations, including trading, clearing, settlement, and regulatory compliance. Michael Habte, welcome to IPO-VID. Where in the world are you today?
Thank you so much, Patrick. A very, very nice introduction. And thank you for having me. I am in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, right now.
And in, by the looks of it, from the branding on the wall behind you, the headquarters of the Ethiopian Securities Exchange.
Correct. We're actually in our new office. We just moved here, 6 months ago. So, yes, I'm discussing with you from the office. Mm-hmm.
That's a joy to have you coming to us from the office in Addis Ababa. And tell me, you say you moved to those offices 6 months ago, but actually the exchange has only been trading for, 6 months, less?
Yeah, technically, actually, we've only started this project about 3 years ago. So it officially launched in January. We've had the first listing approved, and then official trading itself will start very soon.
That's fantastic. And so tell us a little bit about, your journey. I mean, I mentioned some of those big names that you've worked for, but where were you born and how did you come to be in the project office of the ESX?
Thank you. Good question. Actually, I have a very interesting route to where I ended up, so I'll try to be brief. But I was actually born in Athens, Greece. My father used to work in the Ethiopian Airlines, so we moved around quite a bit when I was younger. So he happened to be stationed in Greece at the time. So I was born there, but we moved back to Ethiopia. So I went to school here in my early years until the 4th grade. And then we moved to the UK. So I lived in London for about 3 years as well, just also due to my father's work. And then following that, I moved to America. A lot of my family was there already. So I finished my schooling, mostly high school and university, both bachelor's and master's in the US. I can keep going, but...
carry on. Tell us. No, please, carry on.
Yeah. So I lived in 3 continents, I think, by the time I was 13 or 14. So it was good. It made me adapt a lot and make a lot of different friends, but also learn different cultures. and also interact with different types of people. But I think it helped shape me and the rest of my life, of course. But following, I think when I went to university in the University of Houston in Texas, I have relatives there. So I studied finance, economics. I was very fascinated with the financial sector at the time. This was in the early 2000s. So it was a commodity boom, stock market boom, and Houston's a very they call it the energy capital of the world, for oil, natural gas, especially on the finance side, on the trading side. So I was very passionate about that stuff early on in my career. So I joined Citibank in end of 2006 or so. So if you recall, I'm sure many of the viewers may already know this, but now that it's been almost 20 years, getting a bit old. But back then, a lot of prices were at record levels. I think inflation adjusted. I don't think oil has even approached that level. So the market was very lively. There was a lot of trading activity. In general, financial markets were very lively, as you remember, and the investment banks, etc., were hiring like crazy at the time, and bonuses were very high. Regulation was relatively more lax. This is before the financial crisis. So it was really interesting to see that all kind of develop at a young age. So I worked for Citibank. They had an institutional clients group that basically was the broker-dealer / investment bank for the energy sector. They dealt mainly with institutional clients, hedging as well as speculating on oil, gas. In the Houston office, it was mainly oil and gas and power. Those were the sectors, but we had offices in Singapore and London as well. Singapore was more precious metals, etc. But it really, as a young 23, 24-year-old, it really exposed you to a lot. You are surrounded by very bright people. That's one thing I always appreciate. Really talented people, agnostic of degree and all that stuff. I mean, I remember a neuroscientist, I think, was one of the head traders at the time. He was a neurologist by training, but he was working in finance. So it gave me a good perspective. It was very interesting. But one thing, just to following that period, obviously, as the crisis came, a lot of banks were falling into trouble. It's at the time I also started shifting my attention. I realized the value of data analysis early on, because that's where a lot of the direction was going. Nowadays we talk about AI. And everybody's learning Python. Not everybody, but a lot of people have Python, all these quantitative skills. Back then, it was really heavily Excel-based, and the industry in general was not as quantitative as it is today. But you could tell it was going in that direction. So personally, I made a decision to pursue kind of a master's degree. I worked at Citi for a couple of years. I wanted to go back to school. I went back to school and studied economics. I did a master's in economics at Johns Hopkins in Washington, and it was more focused on statistical analysis, financial econometrics. So that was really good. It kind of transitioned me to my later part of my life. Then I headed back to Houston. At the time I was engaged. So I headed back to Houston. I was in Washington, D.C. I headed back to Houston, worked for a couple of years at Wood Mackenzie, did some forecasting. So over there, I did also oil and gas, mostly research, but also kind of learned a little bit more about foreign exchange, forecasting and analysis. So helping round out, the different asset classes. And then following that, fast forward, I joined a bank called BBVA. It's a Spanish bank. They had bought a regional bank in Alabama, Texas, called Compass. So I joined them in their fixed income group. So they had a treasury division, but within the treasury, there was liquidity management, portfolio management, and then my team kind of was responsible. This was post the crisis. So banks were getting a lot more regulated at the time. So our job as an internal economist was to really forecast and project, do scenario analysis on the bank's balance sheet. So it was good because it really helped you learn. When you work in a bank in the treasury division, you're kind of in the engine room. You have to understand the various products the bank is selling out there, and also the various drivers and related to kind of how the macroeconomy is related to us. So I did that for about 7 years. Between 2014 2021, really helped build quantitative skills, help analyze the economy better, but also understand how the banking business works. And it was a top 20, I would say 25 bank. And part of my role also was conducting stress testing on the bank's balance sheet and presenting that to the Federal Reserve. So very good experience. Following that, I think just to fast forward how I got here, and I'll stop it now for a second. I think my family was still in Ethiopia. I always had the itch to come back to Ethiopia. My father, my mother were here. My wife's mother was also here. So I always had the itch and see what I can do here and what I can contribute. So I moved here about 4 years ago. Maybe I'll stop there in case there's questions or.
Gosh, there is so much there to decompress. It's fascinating. A really, really intriguing tale of life across 3 continents. And curiously, we get a comment from Michael Smith, who adds, I heard a rumor you're a Liverpool football fan. Nothing you've said so far gives any indication of why. That's fine. You don't have to even admit to that. Your secret is safe with us, Michael. But there you go, from one Michael to another.
It's okay. I'll be public. I'm a very strong Liverpool fan.
You're a very strong Liverpool football fan. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, I don't understand how you get from Greece to the USA to. I wasn't aware that there was a large either Washington DC or Houston fraternity for Liverpool Soccer Club. So that's interesting.
Not a lot, at least not that I'm aware of. Not in Houston.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I mean, just fascinating altogether. Thank you very much for sharing that piece of trivia from your knowledge, Michael Smith. I appreciate that as well. So really interesting, actually. I mean, I'm fascinated to know, you more or less didn't live in Ethiopia as a child. I mean, most of your childhood was spent out of the country. What's
Correct.
it like after these amazing different nations and continents coming back to Liverpool and living there? Coming back to Liverpool, good grief. Coming back to Addis Ababa. Gosh, how could I possibly confuse the two?
Yeah, I never lived in Liverpool.
No, never lived in Liverpool. No. I'm coming back to Addis Ababa and living in Ethiopia.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. To be honest, I've always had relatives here. My family was always here, so I came back and forth a lot. I didn't actually formally live here, but it's been very fascinating, I have to admit. I could spend a long time talking about this alone, but maybe if I had to name 2-3 points, I think number one would be, it's changed a lot since I was younger, obviously. Not only like development-wise, not like what you see. I mean, if you come to Addis right now, I mean, it looks like a construction mecca. I think on a global basis even, it's a lot of construction, a lot of infrastructure development. But also, I think just the mentality, people, obviously it's a much bigger country, a much bigger population. The work ethic, etc., has changed. It used to be, I think, more slower paced. I think now, just globalization, you kind of see a lot of things. It's very interesting. Even in the last 10 years, there are major differences for me coming here versus 10, 15 years ago. We are highly connected. People who've never left Ethiopia, sometimes you even think they've been outside of Ethiopia for a long time. But for me, it's been very fulfilling. It's been a lesson, I think, coming back and adapting to day-to-day life. But all in all, very happy, very enjoying it. It's a good challenge. I like challenges, and based on what I've said earlier, it's like I've always had to adapt to different environments. So I actually enjoy that.
So tell me, when you made the move back to Addis Ababa, you didn't know about the Ethiopian Securities Exchange project when you made the move?
At that very time, no, I did not. Mm-hmm. I heard about it, but I did not. I was actually here for something else that I had started, but a few months, 6 months into it or something, I was approached and recruited for this position. And it's something fascinating. You don't get to start, stock exchange every day. So I said, why not? Let me try this and see what we can do.
Well, one of the things I think is lovely is that the pride of Ethiopia that's coming through your exchange, because when we've posted anything on LinkedIn, there's lots of people from Addis Ababa and from the countryside who are all saying, what a great project. We're all so proud of Ethiopia. And I think that's really lovely, actually. I think it's fantastic when lots of people have got behind the project. So tell us about it. I mean, without telling us the dirty details, you arrived on kind of day one in the project office, and presumably there were sort of blank whiteboards, blank pieces of paper, and you started from there, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, literally, it was like that. So I'll try to give a more concise version of the story because 3 years is quite a while. It was exactly 3 years ago in May. Now that I think about it, we're in June 17. It was around May 20, latter part of May 25 or something. So just to discuss the formalities, when I started, a memorandum of understanding was signed between Ministry of Finance here, as well as this institution called Ethiopian Investment Holdings. It's a sovereign wealth fund of the country. And lastly, FSD Africa, or Financial Sector Deepening Africa. It's a niche specialist NGO that focuses on financial market development in Africa, but it's also supported by FCDO, British Development Agency. So these three parties signed an agreement to help set up the project office, basically the project office I was helping co-lead. And really, like you said, we started with terms of reference of what our job is as a project manager. It was like 4 or 5 things, really. Write a business plan, because we had to raise money, do a lot of stakeholder engagement, draft the rules for the exchange, draft the communication policy. So it was like you're given a blank slate, but basically told to create a startup. But the difference here is this is basically a national startup, a national level financial market infrastructure. So we really had a blank slate. It was 3 of us actually at the signing ceremony, or that period of the time. It was only 3 of us. We didn't have a budget. We were fully just supported by FSD Africa. And the goal was to basically operationalize the exchange, draft a business plan. What kind of exchange can we have for Ethiopia? Draft a business plan, get the business plan approved, raise money. And I'll come back to the capital aspect, but just as a high level, we were tasked to design a plan, for the next 2 years, just like any project, without overcomplicating it. We had a timeline. We had a very tight timeline, to be honest, given where we were as a market and as an ecosystem, to develop all of this. Just remember, Ethiopia did not have functional regulated capital markets for 50 years. It was due to political ideology. Since the 70s, since 1974, there was no stock exchange, no capital market regulator, no brokers, no investment bank. When we have this chart of the ecosystem, none of that existed. Many countries, even in Africa, they have existing brokers and intermediaries, even before the exchange, even before the regulator. So we really had to develop it from scratch, and we had to make a lot of predictions of how things would turn out. So that's kind of how it started. Maybe I'll stop there. If you have a specific question, I can get more into the details.
I am interested because obviously you had these stakeholders, and that was very useful. So they were kind of seeding what was going on and giving you a start in life. But you had nonetheless a kind of blank piece of paper. So presumably, did FSD Africa, were they able to come with a great deal of know-how or input or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. I can't say enough. Till this day, FSD Africa has played a major role in the development of the capital markets, not just the stock exchange, but simultaneously with us. Remember what I was saying, there was no ecosystem. So the regulator also was being set up through a project office at the same time. They became an authority. It's called the Ethiopian Capital Market Authority. They are the overarching regulator of capital markets here by law. So they were also kind of in parallel with us being set up, also supported by FSD Africa, technically, financially. And then you have this thing called a central securities depository. It's like your clearing and settlement takes place in this system. That's housed at the central bank, but that's also a parallel project with us. So you have these 3 sister projects going together all at the same time, and FSD Africa had a role in all of them, from not just financially, but technical assistance, conducting study tours. We learned a lot from looking at other markets. One advantage of coming late is we're one of the, I tell people this, that we're the biggest country in the world, both GDP-wise as well as I think population-wise, without a stock exchange, without a capital market. So the good news is you can learn a lot from others, both regionally as well as, more developed countries. So one thing we did a lot of was engagement with other exchanges, other regulators, other ecosystem players, between 2022 and 2024. We did a lot of study tours, both regionally. We went to Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, but then we also looked at a little more somewhat advanced countries, South Africa, Malaysia. Malaysia is quite a big hub for Sharia compliant securities, or Islamic finance compliant securities. So we got a big exposure to all that. And a lot of that was due to, the support we got from FSD Africa.
That's very interesting. So, you got this support from FSD Africa, but nonetheless, it's quite an issue because you have to still win the hearts and minds of the local community before you get towards the idea of onboarding brokers. So you have to make noise to say what you're going to do. And you've got to liaise with government and regulators. And if there's been no capital market for 50, 60 years, we can't presume that the regulators are particularly au fait with capital markets. So there's a great deal of diplomacy in the background that goes on in terms of everybody educating everybody else, right?
Yeah, really, that's what you spend a lot of time on. I'll give you specific data points. So one of our targets as a project office was I mentioned stakeholder engagement. I mean, we literally measured it. We would measure how many meetings we had. I think at some point we had counted up to 400 or 500 meetings, various, one-on-one, bilateral, but this is cross-sectoral, public sector, private sector, pension fund. We discussed with the informal brokers. We have informal, unregistered brokers, as you call them, unlicensed brokers, because there was no, regulatory framework. Yep. So these are the guys we met with within the first couple of months of being on the job, just to understand on the ground what's going on. Because shares are being traded OTC. They're just not traded like in a formal manner. But people were trading and brokers were taking commissions in the middle. So we did like a lot of engagement, back to what you said in terms of buy-in. And this is also with government as well. We work closely with the central bank as well as the Capital Market Authority, who was a project office at the time. We were almost daily, weekly engagements. And also I want to mention, we were led by a steering committee, just structurally speaking, as a project office. Even though we were small, we had a project steering committee. It was assembled of bank executives, insurance sector, central bank, Ministry of Finance. So that was also one way we tried to get, luckily the project was structured in a way that you had different buy-in from different people early on, and they tracked the progress of the project. And I really want to also say that the political will has always been there. This was always an initiative of the government to make it successful. And this is not just verbally, but also financially. We're a public-private partnership, this exchange. It's actually set up as a share company. It's not fully owned by the government, but 25% of the exchange is owned by the government through Ethiopian Investment Holdings, the sovereign fund I mentioned earlier. So there's also a financial incentive in terms of political will for this to succeed as an exchange.
Well, it's also very interesting, isn't it? Because there was a precursor in one sense to the capital market, which was the commodity market. And that was a hugely successful project in Ethiopia, the ECX. And actually, we got a question from that from our commodities doyen, Anne Berg. Hello, Anne. Great to see you. Looking forward to seeing you on this show next week, Anne Berg, actually. What is your perspective on the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange? Does it add synergy to capital markets development? Very interesting.
You want me to go ahead and address it now?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, this is just my opinion. Obviously, these are two separate institutions with different goals. I worked in the energy sector earlier, so I have a bit of familiarity with commodity exchanges. But in terms of, it's been a very, very big value add, I think, for our country. I think at the time, the ECX was the first commodity exchange in Africa. So it's quite innovative. It's been around now, I think, for almost 16, 17 years. So it's a big pride for our country. As maybe you don't know, some of your viewers may know, but Ethiopia is a major coffee producing country on a global level. So coffee, sesame, various edible oils, etc., are traded on the commodity exchange. But we are mutually independent companies. We're focused on equities, debts, equities, as well as money market products. So we're more complementary to what's existing. Obviously, down the road, if derivatives come, there are going to be, I think, areas for collaboration. But we're such a young exchange. We have to start kind of with the vanilla products, especially given the context that I mentioned earlier. We haven't had exchanges ever here, for 50 plus years. So I think once the market starts developing, I think definitely in phase 2, medium term, we have to find ways to collaborate with the commodity exchange and product development, potentially on some of the exchange. So a lot of the commodities traded on the ECX are on the spot basis. But if in the future, if there's futures, other kinds of derivatives that come up, I think there's going to be a lot of synergies between the two institutions. But they're mutually independent institutions.
Yes, they are mutually independent. Sorry, I wasn't trying to suggest they weren't, because obviously that was a totally different project about 15 years ago, which set up, although if I do remember correctly, the founder of the ECX, she is on the board as a non-executive director of SX. Am I right in that? Or she's on an advisory board?
She is on the board.
She's
Correct.
on the board, yeah.
She's on our board.
I thought she was. I just couldn't quite recall. Michael Smith, you've got a fantastic question that you've asked here, and I'm going to come back to it in just a moment. So it's going to feed into the narrative if you will give me some patience, because it's a super question. So you're working your way through. You're building this up. You're meeting lots of people. You're going out and talking to people as you go along. And as you say, there's already some kind of securities market happening. There are securities markets happening in the surrounding countries. You've got, what was it like trying to get people to become more kind of capital markets aware so far?
Good question. That's not an easy question, but I think we always, a goal of our team, I think in general, is really to try to simplify things. We don't need to overcomplicate it. The financial sector, I'm sure a lot of the audience can relate. There's so much jargon used, so much these complicated words. Really what we try to do, I think, as a team in general, and to help educate, within our reach, is really to boil it down to, what is a share exactly? What is a debt security? How does that, relate to the local dynamics right now? So an example we use a lot is that the capital markets are not technically new here. They're just not been modernized. They haven't been regulated efficiently. I shouldn't say efficiently. They haven't been regulated, period. The law was not there and the infrastructure was not there. So these major pieces were not there, but we have a lot of things in existence. So in Ethiopia, just to give the viewers kind of an idea, the financial sector, the central bank requires all banks, all insurance companies, all microfinance to become public share companies. Most people were not aware of this, I think, even locally, that it was a law, actually. And these share companies raised capital, starting 30 years ago. Since 1994 was our first private bank. It used to be communist in Ethiopia, so we only had a state bank. But from 1994 onwards, you've had quite a lively, let me say, retail investor-driven financial sector. Now today you have about 30 banks competing in different aspects across the country. Quite profitable, relatively speaking, when you look at their financial numbers on returns, etc. So these guys have been raising money. These companies have been raising money. The practice of doing an IPO is not foreign. It just wasn't done in a very, a modernish way. A bank would basically call for subscriptions for people to buy shares. So this practice was not new. Several banks have gone through several issues, actually, issues meaning reissues of shares, and have grown quite significantly over the last 30 years. Just to give you data points, Ethiopia, in terms of total assets, I haven't checked recently, but we're not far from Kenya, which is a much more developed financial sector than us on a relatively basis, with a capital market, with an exchange in existence for 50, 60 years, etc. So the practice, like I said, just to summarize, we try to educate, make it very simple. Whatever the stakeholder is, we visited universities in the country, students, both here in Addis Ababa, but also in other cities. We've been to different regions. We've done workshops and trainings, really to kind of really just educate 101, basic, what is a capital market? What's the purpose? So when you look at it at a basic level, it helps you understand, I think, the more complicated topics. It's just a company that needs money is being connected with an investor who has it, whether it's retail, institutional, etc. That's at the end of the day. The rest of us are just really in the middle. We're mainly intermediaries, both even the exchanges and intermediary brokers are intermediaries. We're just helping facilitate and lubricating the system better.
And actually, that's a very interesting question, because I should have also said at the very start, we may not all who are watching this show today be entirely aware of, well, as Michael Smith says, so you're not just starting an exchange, but an entire market ecosphere, and he wishes you all the very best. That's absolutely true, Michael. But the underlying population of Ethiopia, give us a little bit of color there. What's the overall population of Ethiopia, please?
It's roughly around 120 million people.
Wow.
And demographics-wise, it's not just the absolute number, but demographics-wise, I think I may be wrong, but 75% is below 30. So it's a very young population.
I was just asking the production team, and we're going to put it on screen at the moment, because we've got this fantastic population pyramid. If someone can add that to the screen, and it is actually the most dramatic. Yes, please add that to the screen. That would be lovely if you can. That's the most dramatic population pyramid I have ever seen. I mean, everybody else usually has a little bit of a blip and it goes up, whereas that is genuinely, I mean, that's the cruise missile of perfect triangulation of population pyramids. When we're looking at essentially every demographic is growing bigger as the country goes from the top down to the bottom, but you've got no issue in terms of, well, for a long time to come, in terms of paying the pensions of the people who are in the oldest tiers, etc. That must be an absolute dream to be, for the long term, obviously, to be launching a capital market into, Michael.
No, definitely. I mean, you have the masses and the demographics, so it's like a double win. Yeah, but that's a big driver, I think, why it can succeed.
Well, it's a phenomenal driver. It's also quite staggering. Actually, I had not realized myself. I thought the population of Ethiopia, was about 50 million. So 120 million people. I mean, that's getting you up with the largest nations in the entire continent of Africa, which is pretty stunning, really. I mean, I know there are those Nigerias running up about twice the size at the moment, but even so, that's a very serious number. I mean, it's bigger than France or Germany or Italy or actually pretty much all those people who are in Canada for the G7 this week, apart from the USA and guests like India. You've got a larger population than all of them, which is mind-boggling. So, I mean, as you're building this whole fascinating, nation out, I suppose you've got to the point where you've launched. And now we've got that classic thing, huge amounts of hype, huge amounts of excitement. And of course, actually, basically a little bit like, it's a little bit like pregnancy, except it's like having a pregnant elephant rather than having a pregnant woman or human, isn't it? I mean, you're looking at a gestation period of about 18 months to 2 years or something before you're actually going to get this baby really coming out. I mean, Michael Smith actually asks a great question in that regard. You are starting not really just an exchange with the entire ecosphere, as I mentioned before. As I worked for an emerging market broker-dealer, how are you getting on with getting brokers onboarded to start help build the market? And I wish you all the best, Michael says.
Sure, it's a great question. I think, like I said, one of the challenges, at the time, right now, maybe it's a challenge, but going forward, I think it will solve itself. But, we've just onboarded our first 2 brokers, licensed brokers or investment banks. They're both subsidiaries of banks. So this only happened in the last, I would say, 2 months. So this is, following 3 years of a lot of, background work, a lot of development, a lot of promotion, etc. So we're getting there, and there's a lot more appetite. But like I said, I keep mentioning capacities. It's limited because this is so new for the country, and the economy is relatively closed for so long that we really have to develop the brokers, the intermediaries, because that's really what drives the capital markets at the end of the day. As an exchange, I mean, we have a job, obviously. We have a unique role, I think, in our respect, because we are building the ecosphere, as Michael said. But at the end of the day, it's like people don't pay attention so much to the exchange. When I lived in America, if I traded or if I knew people who traded, they went through their broker. Nobody really paid attention to NYSE or NASDAQ on a daily basis, unless you're just looking at the index. So really, our job is really to do our best job to provide a very easy, a very efficient, modern trading platform for the market, not make it expensive to list, and also not make it expensive in terms of transaction fees. So that's one thing we've been working hard on, is to really make sure that it's economical, the exchange can survive on its own, but also not make it prohibitively expensive like it is in some other countries. Starting 2025, we do have a lot of advantages technology-wise. We can really leapfrog actually many markets. Just to give you a flavor, our exchange can support fixed income, equities, potentially foreign exchange trading. You can also do money markets. So we've already launched a money market, like an interbank platform, because Bloomberg and Refinitiv were never really heavily involved in the banking sector. So we've developed a platform where banks can trade liquidity with each other. And this has also already played, major impact in the banking sector. To give you numbers, we've had about $6 billion traded in about 9 months. And at the rate it's growing, this could even be one of the bigger interbank markets. And this is all happening on the exchange platform. Even though it's an OTC-like product, you can be creative. I think that's one thing we've been fortunate about, is we have this blank slate, like you said earlier. You can be creative and develop new products that are really suitable and customizable for the country itself, and leapfrog some other exchanges. But yeah, onboarding brokers is really our main job. We support them. We train them extensively. We've provided them with the trading system, which they have access to, obviously, once they're trading members. But we've even supplied them with a broker back office system where the system, the exchange is basically licensing it to the first X amount of brokers. These brokers don't have to purchase their own IT software to onboard clients. So a broker can basically use our broker back office system to onboard a client, do the KYC, trade for that client, and then also issue statements, etc., and even generate IFRS compliant reports all through the system. So I think that in the long run will be a big help, I think, to the sector and help it kind of get up to date.
That's magnificent. Yeah, I mean, that's magnificent because you're really modernizing the sector as you go. And it is very interesting. You have the money market element, et cetera, et cetera. So just run us through very briefly. I mean, who is the provider of your kind of matching engine and main core of the exchange system? Yeah,
so we use a company called Infotech is based in Pakistan.
Yes.
They've supplied the system to various countries in Africa, Ghana and Angola. So the peer countries. Also, they've done some work in Kenya. And part of their original team actually worked on the Pakistan Stock Exchange itself. So they're very well versed in developing systems. It's web-based, it's agnostic. In terms of you don't need a computer, you don't need a terminal. So that's kind of who we've been working with.
That's excellent. That's really, really good. And it's good to hear because they actually, if I remember correctly, they implemented remarkably quickly, or maybe you had already signed with them much earlier. But when you announced they were going to sign, there was only a matter of, I mean, not even months, it was more like weeks that just about converted into months, 3 or 4 months before they went live, and they all made the deadline, which was amazing.
Yeah, no, it's been great working with them. I mean, just to give you an idea, so Ethiopia, coming back to macro, maybe big picture, Ethiopia went through a series of reforms on economic reform, macroeconomic reforms a year ago. In July, the country floated its exchange rate for the first time. We used to have fixed exchange rates, more or less, or pegged. It was controlled exchange rates. So this was a big shift for the nation, really. We had freely floating exchange rates for the first time in, like I said, maybe 50 years or so. So at that time, there was a big demand to get the banking sector to start trading liquidity, local currency liquidity with us. So as soon as we signed the contract, we actually had to sign a pre-contract so the work can start sooner on the interbank market. So in theory, as an exchange, we've been operating actually since October. Before our launch, this market was up and running. And that was delivered really quickly. So this company has provided and built repo or repurchase agreement platforms in other markets. So, but we still had to customize it a little bit to suit for our needs because we run an unsecured direct market amongst banks. But that was built really quickly. Like you said, you've done your research, I can tell. I think that was done in a couple of months, quite honestly, which is very fast and very efficient.
I remember being quite shocked because at the time in Exchange Invest, we said we were amazed because you signed Infotech, a very good vendor with a great track record, but you signed Infotech and then you said you were going to go live in, I can't remember when it was, February or March or something was due to be the date. And that was only at that stage a matter of a few months away. And you made it and you launched remarkably coherently, which is great. So where are you now in this sort of the launch platform and how you're getting all of your different pieces of market together? Because the money market is busy, as I see.
Yeah. So let's break it into segments. I think one thing I want to say to viewers is really we wanted to build an exchange that's integrated, from really short-term financing, one overnight, 7 days that banks can trade with each other, to a whole different market where it's equities and bonds, etc. So you want to get different players in the ecosystem. That's the system we've provided, I think, to the market. But where are we now? I mean, so one of the things you face is Ethiopia. I don't know if I mentioned it. The banks I mentioned earlier, the financial sector alone has about 400,000 shareholders. And when I was talking about OTC, unregulated, et cetera, this has accumulated over the last 30 years. So we have a large batch of shareholders who hold physical securities. So the real legwork that's been happening from the last 4 or 5 months since we launched is really getting these securities dematerialized or make them electronic, converting it from physical to electronic. Because without them being in electronic form, like any exchange today, you cannot trade on an exchange. We have to have all the records, all the shares, all the assets in an electronic register. So that's been a lot of the work that's been done, number one. Number two, we've been onboarding brokers to trade in our markets on the equity side, especially. You have to go through a broker. We didn't have licensed brokers until March or April. So it was actually after our launch, or official launch. So that's taken place. So where are we at now? The next things we're looking forward to. So Wagagan Bank is the first company that was approved for listing. We expect that now that we have licensed brokers who've become members of the exchange, we expect these shares to be trading in the very near future. The CSD project also is ready now, meaning the Securities Depository. So all the pieces, remember I said we were starting from scratch, the various pieces. So the exchange was set up, the authority was set up first, more than a year ago. Now that we have brokers, we have the CSD set up, and now the listings will come. So Wagagan is a bank. Ethio Telecom also was doing an IPO, which is the main telco here. So that will also start trading and get listed on our exchange soon. I would say in the next couple of months, you'll have 2-3 listings to get the market kicked off on the equity side. And also on fixed income, we're back to what you said, what we mentioned earlier. This is a big economy, relatively speaking. There's a big demand for access to finance, not just on private sector, but for government. So government will start issuing treasury bills, going forward treasury bonds through the system called the CSD, and that will be traded on the exchange. So we expect a lot of this trading, both fixed income as well as equity market. Nascent stage, obviously, it takes time. But at least nascent stage, we expect a lot of that trading to start happening in the next couple of months because all the pieces are coming together now.
That's really fascinating. I mean, that's quite a remarkable run out for you all. And tell me, what's your sort of head count at the moment?
Oh, good question. So we were 3, like I mentioned. We became a company, going backwards a little bit. We became a company in October 2023. So building staff itself was a big task. We fully onboarded everybody. So we have about roughly 30 staff right now, and an innovative program we also incorporated into our team. We have a young professionals program. So we hire graduates who are only less than 2 years out of school here locally. And we onboarded about 9 of them last year. And a lot of them now are transitioning into full-time roles. So the idea is for these young professionals to have a year of experience, rotational around different departments. I run the operations department, so some kids will be in operations, they'll work in technology, some will work on the legal side, come into operations, etc. So that just concluded their term, just concluded this month. So a lot of them are transitioning now into areas that they choose. So 20, I would say full-time, 20 or so plus full-time, and then another 8 or 9 young professionals. So roughly 30 is our headcount. And we don't expect a lot more staff after this.
That's great. That's really, really terrific. Certainly if you can run at that sort of level of staffing for a while at least, that should at least remove and reduces your burn. It makes you able to move much faster, and it's all very, very advantageous. Let me just interrupt actually for a second, Michael, to say thank you very, very much to those of us who've been sending us thumbs up and likes so far. If you can't send us a little heart, ladies and gentlemen. It helps the ESX, it helps this show, it helps make sure that we get further up through the AI on the directories and people know that we're here. You can even do it sort of K-pop style like that. I don't mind how you do it, but please send us a little bit of love. We'd really, really appreciate it, because all those sorts of thumbs ups help get this sort of discussion higher up. And it's vitally important, because this is an important thing to be talking about. A new stock exchange that can power the money market, the capital market in its entirety, from soup to nuts, as you would say in the UK. It's a phenomenal thing. So Michael, tell me, when you're looking at where you've been so far, it's obviously difficult at this juncture because lots of things have been built, lots of things are launching, but also we all know, as I said before, it's the elephant genesis. It's going to be another 2 years before you'll really have a lot of success stories to jump up and down and talk about. How do you manage to keep yourselves motivated to keep going as you're delivering the long-term aim of a stable capital market for Ethiopia?
Okay, that's a tough one. Maybe it's just my personal opinion, but maybe others agree with me who work at the exchange. I think day to day, it's a very mentally stimulating job. Let me put it that way. As I said, I've worked in the West quite a bit. And you don't really face a day that's the same as yesterday in some respects. So that kind of keeps you on it, if I put it that way. You really have to learn a lot. And given, like I said, it's a blank slate you're working with, and you're having to educate a lot of people as well as you go. So you're learning, you bring experience, but you're also learning as you go. So I think I find that exciting. I think that's a reason, I speak on behalf of probably some of our staff, that one reason they joined us is because a lot of them worked at other places, but this is a new exciting project, career-wise, etc. But mentally, also intellectually, it can stimulate you, and you're seeing it live. I mean, you're in the middle. As an exchange, you see everything. You see both on the policy side, the impact the decisions have, and then you also see on the market side, on what's going on. So you see, to give you an example, let me just cite the market, the interbank market, right? It's not as fancy, it's not as sexy as the stock market itself, but it actually matters. I mean, really, liquidity is a big problem with some banks. When I moved here, to give you an example, around holidays, etc., you go to a bank, sometimes, you face issues in terms of getting your cash out. There's literally cash shortages. So the interbank market, one reason we brought it, two main reasons. Number one is to help build the longer-term fixed income market, but also just day-to-day liquidity management. It makes banks more efficient. They can optimize how much liquidity they keep. So if I have excess liquidity today, I can sell it for very short, relatively low risk to another bank who needs it. So that kind of lubrication you're seeing, I mean, you see the impact live, and that's in a short amount of time. We did not have a functioning interbank market at all before. I mean, banks would lend to each other over 3 to 6 month kind of CD style, or certificate of deposit, or time deposits, we called it here. Very risky, high interest rates, very costly. Now it's a much more transparent market. So these are, you feel like you're trying to bring solutions at the end of the day. You're just trying to bring solutions as an exchange, as opposed to just being an intermediary. You want to bring solutions to your various stakeholders. So that, I think, has been very rewarding and very interesting also on an intellectual level.
I think it's a phenomenal point you make, because the Ethiopian birr, as it was allowed to float last year, it needs something that can help support it. And nothing is going to be better than a money market that is underpinning the actual foreign exchange value of the currency. And those are things that people really don't think about. And certainly in a lot of currencies and economies I can think of, the lack of a better functioning money market is at the root of a lot of problems. But as you say, the public don't really care about the money market. They don't really think about it until they want to go to the bank and they want to borrow something, or they want to get some money out of the bank, or however it is. There's no real conscious thinking about that, whereas the stock market's something quite different. So, I mean, this is absolutely fascinating. You're at a position where you're growing and so on. You had I think you had a very successful funding round earlier this year. Just tell us a little bit about that, because that funds you for quite a way into the future, right? Yeah.
I didn't mention too much details, but one of the reasons the project office, why we existed, is we had to draft a business plan. We had to raise money because, like I said, we only can get 25%, and that's a maximum capped by law from the government. So we still had to go and really act like our own advisor. We had financial advisors, but we had to really sell the exchange and the vision. So our capital raise started. It's been over now for about a year. We've had we closed about a year ago. But we started, I think, while we're in the project office developing the business plan, etc. It took about a year, I would say, 2023. We did road shows here in Addis, locally, but we also went to Kenya, Nairobi, as well as London, to really kind of, more than just raising money, was really to tell the story of what we're trying to do, kind of get the word out. Because like I said earlier, Ethiopia's relatively been a closed economy. We want to, show that things are changing from a policy standpoint. So our capital raise concluded in March 2024. We were heavily oversubscribed, actually. We were almost 200%, 140%, I think, oversubscribed. We were looking for about $10-11 million. We ended up obtaining about $26 million. And it was a nice mix. We had about 49 private sector investors, mostly banks, mostly insurance. We really wanted to bring the banks into our system, not just for the money per se or the capital. It was really because we realized that we need the money market, we need the debt market. And a lot of that is driven by banks. So we wanted their buy-in, because this is one thing we learned in other countries. The exchanges were run by brokers as opposed to really having commercial bank presence. So commercial banks would do a lot of OTC trading. amongst each other on the debt side. And then the exchanges were heavily reliant on equities. And obviously in Africa, our economies are not as large. They're not as deep as the West. So you can only go so far with an equity market only as an exchange, as a business. So we got a lot of banks and insurance. So we signed up to 16 banks, 12 insurance companies here. Insurance is useful, obviously, because they have assets and they can invest long term. But also we got a variety of shareholders, including 3 foreign shareholders. The Nigerian Stock Exchange Group invested in us, FSD Africa invested in us, and then Trade and Development Bank, which is an East African development bank that does a lot of trade financing work, but they also issue bonds on regional exchanges. So a lot of these were strategic investors that we were chasing. It was a private placement. It was very successful. I'm sure somebody's going to ask this, but the public, we didn't sell it to retail, but the idea is eventually to self-list the exchange. It's very common nowadays for exchanges to list themselves. Yep. But once we become profitable, I think not too long, and break even, the idea is that we self-list and then some shares will be sold to the public so that the public can own the exchange.
And off the top of your head, in US dollars, roughly what does that make the value of your company at what you did your last round at?
Oh, if it's 1-to-1, I mean, I'm not the best at this, 25 million, but this was before. Yeah, in USD terms, it was about 25 million, 26 million that we raised.
That's a good number.
We actually had to return money. We actually returned some money because we were overcapitalized.
Right. And so you raised about 25 million, and that actually makes you worth about 100 million, something like that. Is that right? Somewhere around there?
I can't give you. I actually, Patrick, this is the first time I've even been asked this or thought about it. Today's valuation, I don't know. I don't have an exact.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to work out roughly where it was when you funded. I mean, just to give us a 25. Vague idea of where you are. I mean, that's very good. Well, look, I mean, we've had an incredible conversation during the course. Our hour is almost over, so I'm going to have to wrap up here with the usual question. Michael Habde, thank you for being a brilliant guest today and elucidating us all about the Ethiopian Securities Exchange. But where do you believe, Michael Habde, the capital market revolution goes next?
Ooh, okay. Just globally, anywhere, or just
anywhere,
here?
Any which way you want.
Okay. Good question. I think, I think the old days of, where you need expertise, you need to be a financial market expert to invest, etc., I think will be kind of gone with AI. Even having roles of people who advise and finance, etc., I wonder about it. So I think the revolution will go almost everything is becoming data-driven. Trading is becoming very algorithmic. It's very hard to get edge, as they use the term, or generate excess returns that the market is not generating. So I think the revolution will go quantitative driven. Already it has been, but I think even more, even with decision making for people to make investments, etc. But also I think the rest of the world will eventually, the revolution, I think in my view, the rest of the world, the West has been leading obviously in the financial sector for a long time, but I think the rest of the world is catching up and can even leapfrog in certain respects. But really, if I just put it succinctly, I think the revolution is going in the fact that it's truly being democratized now. When I started in school 20 years ago, I had to call a broker, I had to pay a fee just to trade. Now AI can basically build me a program to connect to a broker, set up an account and trade with very little input from anybody else, sitting anywhere in the world. So it's really leaps and bounds. The sector is changing. But I would say it's really becoming more data-driven. All these processes we're talking about, brokers, exchanges, etc., will transform, I think, over time. Blockchain can make major changes down the road, especially in terms of settlement and how quick trades can be settled, etc. You don't need to wait 2-3 days to get your money. So a lot of that will change, in my view.
A marvelous answer. Thank you very, very much. And actually, we're just going to try and slip in a couple of fabulous comments that have just come through. Thank you very, very much. Sefa Samoro, shout out to Belane, who's probably watching now. So hello, Belane. Shout out to you, definitely. And Estefanos Shekur, proud to see how the ESX is growing. I have no doubt this Ethiopian Securities Exchange will be the hub of capital in East Africa. Well, there you go. No pressure there, Michael. No pressure whatsoever from Estefanos. Thank you very, very much for those comments. Thank you for the love during the course of the show. Thank you for your remarks specifically. Estefanos Shakur, Sefa Samoro, Anne Berg, and Michael Smith. It's been fantastic to chat with you today. I hope I've managed to get everybody in there who made a remark. Really, really appreciate it. The most important thing is, Michael, let's circle back. Year, 18 months' time. Let's have a chat and see how you're going, because I know you're going to have lots of exciting things to tell us. This is an amazing project. And like Michael Smith, we all wish you every success from Exchange Invest and right the way through the parish of exchanges. We want you to succeed. That's the really vital thing. And that about wraps up our show for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to our production team of Russell and Natalie and Jamil. They've done a fantastic job. Next week, now we're going to have a different format. We're going to introduce for number 180, there's a good GAN number for all the technical analysts out there. We're going to have a panel session. We're going to be discussing matters of moment in markets. If you want to join, if you want to send us a question, then ping us before, during, or well, better to do it before or during the event, because if you do it after, we won't actually manage to get your question on time. The guests are going to be Mark Bettis, co-founder of BIDS, Peter Randall, a co-founder and CEO of Chi-X, and Anne Berg, former director of the Chicago Board of Trade, advisor to the United Nations on commodities, and our all-round commodities doyen. Think of your questions now and add those for next week. In the meantime, my name is Patrick L. Young. I just want to say I wish you all a fantastic week in life and markets. And of course, if you're looking to build your own Ethiopian securities exchange, give us a ring. We're ready to build whatever you want to in the marketplace sector. Michael Habday, thank you very, very much. We will see you soon, and all the very, very best to the Ethiopian Securities Exchange. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.